This afternoon, I want to share briefly with you some insights from neuroscience that are going to help you understand how to own your future, but by understanding more about this amazing organ. How many of you have one of these, by a show of hands? How many has one? We've got one lady in the front row, a couple of others. Brilliant. My proposition to you is that you've all got one of these. You've all got a brain, and everyone that you come into contact with also has a brain. And therefore, we can turn to the field that tells us all about how this organ works to understand more about how we can own our future and be the leaders of the future. I'm going to do something a little bit unorthodox, but I'm going to ask if I can have a volunteer, preferably someone from the front. Brilliant, there's a chap on the end. Come on up. And as you're coming on up, I'm going to tell you about an experiment, but while I tell you about this experiment, which represents many experiments, I thought it's nice for you to have some visual entertainment, because you've just had your lunch, you've got a big afternoon ahead of you. So, sir, can you juggle? Juggle? Yes. Okay. Can you start by pretending you can't? Yes, so just sort of have a go and really, oh, and they fall on the floor. That's it, brilliant. Okay, so in this experiment, they took gentlemen like these. You can pick them up and keep going. And they asked them to practice juggling for 30 minutes every single day for 6 weeks. And what they found as they progressed through the 6 weeks is that they became better and better at this juggling, becoming better and better. And by the end of the 6 weeks, they could do the juggling beautifully, which we're almost there at, right? Pretty good. Should we give them a round of applause? Brilliant. Thank you. And before you go, could you just turn around to everyone? Just so that they can see the back of your head. That's it. So what they did in this experiment, which was different, was that they looked at an area at the back of the brain through MRI scanning, and they found that this region of the brain, called the interparietal sulcus if you're interested, but don't worry about it if you're not, it actually increased in density. The synaptic density of white matter in this region increased. You can turn back again so they can see your face before you disappear. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we heard earlier about a particular cell. Can anyone remember what this cell is called? The neuron, absolutely. You've been paying attention this morning, that's great. So we've got billions of these neurons in the brain, and there's different parts of the neuron. And the particular part that increased in density in this study was the white matter, which is the cells in the middle of the neuron, which speed up our electrical transmission in the brain. And as you can imagine, just like you want in your electrical equipment, the faster it goes, the better the result you get, the better product, and the better the brain works. So you want your synapses to be firing on all cylinders, and you want the density of this middle part of the neuron to be as strong as possible, which is one of the reasons we consume the omegas, so the avocado, the nuts, the essential oils. So what does all this tell us? Well, the fact that physically, structurally, the brain changed, it means that our brain has got this property called neuroplasticity. Give me a wave if you've heard of neuroplasticity before. A few of us. And to this day, that remains the same wherever I go in the world and whichever organization I'm speaking to. And however intelligent the amazing group of people are in front of me, neuroplasticity is the foundation of how our brain changes. So you are who you are today, but tomorrow, your brain, structurally, physically, will have changed. And my invitation to you is to do this intentionally. Many people stumble through life not intentionally shaping their brain. And the downside of that is that it doesn't enable us to be as powerful and as strong as we want to be, and to actually do all the things that we want to do in life. So I'm encouraging you to be intentional. So of the 3 things I'm going to mention in this short time, the first is neuroplasticity, and the fact that your brain is always changing, and you can be intentional in how that happens. The second thing that I want to talk to you about is the power of your attention. And I'm thrilled to say I've got many of your attention at the moment, and that's probably due to the novelty of what I've just shown you. But across the globe, it's now commonplace to be distracted and to try and multitask. And the cost that that has on our brain is really, really high. And I don't need to name names or point you out, but some of you, when we've had these amazing speakers over the last day and a half, have been actually on Twitter or on WhatsApp. And I'm sure all those things that you were doing were very important, but these moments have gone, and your attention was not fully on them, some of you, and your ability to recall those moments in the future will be heavily hampered. So my invitation again is, when we pay attention to something, we find ourselves better able to catalog it in our brain. So we have to really be present in order for the information to go in. But then the next stage, which some of you are not going to like, is that we need to sleep. And I've already spoken to some of you, and you're doing less than the scientifically discovered 7 to 9 hours. So in order for your brain to be functioning well, you need 7 to 9 hours sleep every single night. And when you're not getting that, then your ability to encode the information and then recall the information is severely hampered. I don't know about you, but sometimes, certainly in England, I encounter people who are a bit irritable, a bit frustrated and struggling to concentrate and feeling tired and a bit overwhelmed. I don't know whether any of you can relate to that, or you just know other people that might be irritable sometimes that you work with. But one of the causes of that is an information overload into our brain. So when we are trying to juggle social media while also listening to something, while also planning what we're going to wear to the mosaic night tonight, all very important things, our brain gets depleted, and our ability to then focus, come up with creative ideas, think about complex problem solving, all gets depleted. So the invitation again is to be intentional with how you invest your attention. It's not an endless supply. We need to cleanse our brain, specifically our prefrontal cortex, a region at the front of our brain, and give ourselves a break. And just to share that the mobile phones, they can be amazing. I know we've talked about technology and how amazing it can be, but there's a particular chemical that is what keeps you coming back and what almost addicts us to our phones. Does anyone know the name of that chemical? Dopamine. I definitely heard it. So absolutely brilliant. This chemical, dopamine, is a very, very influential chemical, and it's fantastic for helping us to pay attention and concentrate and be present in the moment. But it also really reinforces our behaviors. So if I have a quick look on Instagram and get a little hit of dopamine, then it's more likely that I'm going to return to that again and again and again. And I can remember speaking at a conference not dissimilar from this, except that it was in a bank, and there were lots of people that had flown in from around the world, many jet-lagged like some people here may be, and I'd noticed that they were all going to their phones just about after 5-10 minutes of a speaker starting, and it was because their attention levels were dipping and they were craving that wake-up call. So like that shot of caffeine or whatever might wake you up doing a couple of laps around the hotel, they were searching for that from their phones. And it did wake them up a little. It did inject some dopamine into them, but the downside was that they missed what was going on at the time. So we've got to become experts in how our brains work so that we can trick ourselves into releasing the dopamine when we need it so that we can pay attention. So that was the second thing I wanted to talk about, attention. And the third and final thing I feel really echoes a lot of the messages that we've been hearing over the course of this conference, and I feel like it brings the science underpinning why it's so important. And it's the area that, from my perspective, from the field of neuroscience, I'll call contribution, but others might call it purpose or meaning or your why. And we found through studies that if you give someone the opportunity to contribute to a charity, maybe contribute financially, that actually that activates the same regions in their brain as if they were to be given a financial reward. So you can pay me money or give me the opportunity to donate to a charity, and my brain is responding in a very similar way. So it's in particular the reward network in the brain that gets activated, it gets lit up, and that reinforces my behavior. And it releases dopamine, which helps me to pay attention and focus and helps to reinforce the behavior. Now, this is so exciting because as you go forward owning your future, you have the opportunity to ensure that every single day you are connected to the contribution that you are making. And as these great people now and going into the future, I think one of your greatest opportunities is to ensure that those you're working with are also contributed to their contribution, or also connected to their contribution. Because when we're not connected to the contribution we're making, life can become very challenging. And I'll just share briefly, originally I went to medical school, and the girl in the room next door to me was this amazing, lovely girl, and her family was Sikh, and she studied for the whole of the 10 years that it took to go from when she started studying medicine right up to when she became a GP, a general practitioner, which was what she really wanted to do in medicine. But she'd studied all this time, and by the time that she actually came to be a doctor, she realized people weren't that appreciative. And so she didn't feel connected to the contribution that she would studied for so long to make. So I'll leave you with that thought that connecting with your contribution and helping others, whatever their contribution might be, on a daily basis can really light them up and make life worth living. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy.